Carl, before the call, you were mentioning as part of this kind of refreshed ambition, expanding product lines, expanding your product or your geographic reach. You were thinking, obviously, that will require also focus on operating model efficiency. How does that support your expansion? It would be great to hear a bit more about your thoughts on that.
One of the things that we're doing is strengthening our investment in the technology space. We're doing that locally, but also leveraging, I think, the capabilities that we have throughout the group, which are exceptional. We built a couple of years ago a data and analytics function locally here in London to support not only our portfolio management, to build better insights into our customers, better insights into how we're performing and trending and trading with our broker partners. And that's been a huge step forward. And, look, we've redesigned the operations in terms of how we support our underwriters and then how we start thinking about how that might evolve. And so right now we've got an end-to-end project on the go where we're looking at basically redesigning our underwriting process. I think I'd say at the outset, AI will be a core component of that. But again, given the space that we trade in, Juan, and that large technical complex risk managed account, it will augment what we do. It will enable our underwriters to do it better, faster, and more efficiently. So I think that's the underlying message I would leave there. A lot of work going into what the operating model of the future looks like, focused on how we empower and enable our underwriters through AI. And I think we're going to make meaningful strides, certainly this year, but over the coming years. I'd say our focus tends to be on creating efficiencies through guided underwriting workflows, right? Streamlining underwriting documentation, and then, basically trying to use IDP, intelligent document processing, to get us to a stage where we're taking manual tasks off underwriting operations folks. PVT is the perfect example. That's our first use case where we're delivering IDP actually this quarter to the team, where it's taking schedule of values that are generally input and transforming the underwriting process by solving, what is a major manual pain point within that, solving it through AI. So, I think focus on streamlining, creating a more efficient underwriting process. I guess our chosen strategy, one, is we want to be a leader in our chosen lines of business.
We were talking about, the introduction was all about Gen AI. So let's start with where it is each of your organizations in terms of Gen AI adoption to set the scene. And then we'll go into specific tips of what's worked well and what hasn't.
October of 2022, it seems like a long time, but that's when OpenAI came out with ChatGPT. So it's only been a couple of years. And what has happened in the industry is that number one theme that I'll point out is that there has been a lot of excitement. People are really excited about what's interesting. But the challenge at the same time has been in the last couple of years to figure out how do you discern useful from interesting. So people get excited about different use cases, but then they realize that it might take a lot of investment. You might need to clean up a bunch of data before you start using AI. There are people challenges. So all of that is creating a spectrum on which people are, all the way from having tried a few things to some people jumping in right now. In general, my sense is that over the next 6 months, there will be more and more adoption. The pace will continue to increase. But I feel like there will be some companies who will completely miss the generative AI wave and they will jump onto agentic. There is more excitement about that. And those use cases, as was mentioned in the previous conversation, they're somewhat easier to implement. They're smaller in scope sometimes. Now, they have their own challenges that they come with. But in general, I'm very optimistic about agentic AI.
We're not using any AI tools at the moment, and that's what's attracted me to go there. It really is greenfield, and there's a lot of opportunity there. So I'm very excited about that. At Beazley, though, Cytora were one of the first partners that we engaged with who were using Gen AI. And we've been partnering with you now, for about 3-4 years now. We've developed the clearance process, which is now automated. So we can now use Cytora to ingest submission data and clear all submissions that come through. We're now working on triaging. And the next step after that would obviously be decision ready or quote ready data. Other areas within Beasley, where we're using a bit of AI, is obviously on the claim side. There's lots of opportunity there. But also what I'm quite interested in is really using it within technology. So I think we always talk about some business use cases, but I also feel like within technology, we need to be adopting some of those AI tools and showing some of our business stakeholders like the benefit of those. So I'm really looking forward to doing that.
So should we perhaps then jump into kind of the role of AI and perhaps keeping the theme of these three sources of data, historic data, kind of broker provided data and external data? Do you see a specific area across these three where AI is being most impactful?
I think, first of all, many people use AI in the same context as system upgrades or automation of technology, which we're going to be very clear, those things have existed for decades. Automation, AI is not, especially generative AI, is not just an automation of a process to give you an end product. So I think it's important to basically narrow down, what you want to use AI for. And AI, obviously, we all talk about the language that you've got to use is got to be in an environment where you can have reliable data. Now, I can almost certainly guarantee you that even the traditional corporations, the large multinationals, their data is archaic. They've probably gone through a number of systems transformations, not updated the data capability to bring the old data through to a new platform. They probably got it archived somewhere. So it's going to be incomplete. I guarantee you that I've looked at a lot of insurance policies where standard code has been used, not a specific code, and it could be a postcode, it could be a number of different things. So even your own data is not necessarily the most accurate data. But then for AI to be able to operate in that environment, you've got to have enough data. You've got to rely on the third-party data. And for it to be generative, you've got to set the rules for it to narrow down the risks that match your appetite. And once you've got to that point, it should then generate a majority of, and again, I'm going to distinguish here between consumer lines products, SME, and then, more complex commercial risks. I think everybody in the motor or homeowners is pretty much pricing on a portfolio basis, not looking at individual risks. Yes, they go through a questionnaire and it ticks a few boxes, therefore you apply that rate or therefore you apply a different rate. On the SME side, a lot of the small businesses have vanilla products. So being able to say, right, I want to sell X million of that vanilla product, here's the rate, here's the construction type. That's not AI. That's just an automation in a selection process. Being able to get to a point where, right, we've now narrowed down to risks that match our appetite for AI, generative AI, then to make decisioning around, selecting deductibles, looking at your portfolio, not necessarily the policyholder. So that is the next step in terms of making more of those decisions that your underwriters would have done in the past. Now, I also want to say that when you get to the large commercial risks, AI can only go that far because to me, what I define as there's an art and a science to underwriting. The art remains the underwriter's understanding of a segment, of a risk, of the history, of a reputation of an organization, and a gut feel for is this a good risk or not, versus AI providing the science. And you have to have both.
Bettina, when you talk about speed, let's deep dive into that. Why is speed a challenge? Like I can imagine it's becoming, on one side, Allianz is very large. Is it because of the speed at which you as a large organization can move? But I guess that is also compounded by the speed at which technology moves.
I think it's not just because of the size, because I would probably say speed also for smaller companies is a challenge. And it's not how you mobilize a whole organization. It's also that the change of what you talk about, what you want to learn, changes so fast. Imagine, it's fair to say that 1.5 years back, not even 1.5 years back, the topic of Gen AI was not at all on our thinking or on our learning path to the extent as what we had to adopt over the past 1 year, 12 months. That's nothing, right? For an organization to adopt, to apply learning journeys, to bring 160,000 people in our case through this learning. That is something which has been so quickly coming up. We knew instantly that's relevant. It's revolutionary to many of our jobs of how we look at it, how we can use it. And what do you offer to actually take your people on that journey? So that's what I meant by speed. It's also that it's here, right? It's here like this, and it's here to stay. And you need to adopt fast to apply the right learnings, the right mechanisms, so that people can take the journey and feel comfortable on it. And then obviously it is also a size topic, because moving 160,000 people through this learning, they can do certain runs where they work with use cases, where they start to learn how to prompt, as we all know that this is key when it comes to making Gen AI or ChatGPT really an asset. We have adopted internally the technology, and we have our Allianz ChatGPT, if you wish, to be in a safe environment also when it comes to data privacy, when it comes to security elements. So these things, I think we have ramped up really, really quickly. And yet still you need to get the people to do the learning, feel comfortable. And most importantly, it's not just about learning and training. It is about applying it, right? You need to have those use cases where you can test it, where you can start making your own steps with it to see what this can do in your role or in your function.
So it would be great if you give us an overview of those initiatives related to Gen AI or data, but also as you talk through them, how did you make them in a way that they were not just pure theoretical learning? Because I think this is one of the biggest risks. Is it becomes almost like a university class where you learn the concepts of data, but then it's difficult to that. Like, what do you do with that once the training course is over?
I guess that's the key thing, right? A learning in itself without having a chance to apply it will not last. So I think even the learnings we're doing, they are always with practical, exams in there, if you wish, or practical testing, so that you start applying it as you read it, as you listen to. And I think there's no one size fits all. It really depends on what is elementary you need to learn, and to make sure that you have really taken certain things serious. If I look at Gen AI, we are building on a great learning or training, which our technology colleagues have actually developed initially for their developers. Obviously, with the Gen AI and the large language models and all these things change drastically for their population, right? For what is a developer's life in the future, or an IT person's life. But they all started off with the basics of what is Gen AI and makes it so different. And I think this understanding is really fundamental. Before then, obviously, for the large population, you really start to learn how to prompt. And prompting is not an easy thing. If you do it right, you get different input rather than if you just do it as you think it should be smart enough for the system to learn. And then you get feedback, which is either fake, wrong, still reads nicely. And you actually also not maybe trained to make sure that your analysis or that your critical thinking is deepened enough to not take every feedback as granted.
So then moving on to the topic of AI, I guess two questions. One is, where is the industry at right now in using AI? Well, let's start there. First question, where are we using AI?
So varying degree of maturity. A lot of the managing agents I talk to, they have Copilot or some ChatGPT form in front. But if I ask, okay, but how much is actually into your process or enterprise level? When a stat came, I can't remember where it's from, a stat came out the other day, there's about 60% of the industry that is tried AI. They've got POCs, but only 8% have put that AI use case across 5 or more business functions. So it's not hitting that enterprise level yet. And that's the fundamental change. Like once you start putting it into your BAU business, that's where your real change will come from. You've got differing degrees. You've got the Keys and the Hiscocks who are at that level. And then you have quite a bit in the middle who are POCs, tinkering around. And then you have people who haven't started. So it's a wide range.
And what is preventing further adoption, right? Especially, there are a number of case studies and successful implementations. What is hindering some of those going from either zero or just like anecdotal usage as a Copilot to like properly embedding it in the business processes?
I think the same problem we always have: people, process, tech. So how do you get off the legacy? Remapping and redesigning your processes. It's the same problem that RPA had or machine learning had. Why are you just putting AI on bad processes? Right. And then it needs that lean forward to go, well, actually, how do we redesign this process so AI can really do a bang for its buck? Or are we just going to automate processes that have been laying around for the last 20, 30 years and no one can tell us why actually we fill out 6 different forms for validation, like whoever asked for those and who actually reads them. And that's, to do it true, you have to have a mindset of change. And it's that fundamental change in your business. And it's the reason companies struggle with legacy architecture. It's the reason they struggle with process, because it's hard. Like, that's the hard work. But the companies that focus on it and actually get it into their processes and make it part of their ecosystem, their day-to-day working, not just helping them build an Excel spreadsheet or a PowerPoint, they will fundamentally in a couple of years be ahead of all their peers in the industry, because everybody else won't be able to keep track with what AI will do for them.
So acknowledging the challenges doesn't sound like there's an option, right? So you're saying in a few years, unless you are really operationalizing an AI in your processes, you will just be behind your competitors, right?
Yeah. Well, you and I have discussed this. I have this theory, could be a crackpot theory, but but we're going to have to wait for one big guy to go, right? So it's someone who pushes a lot of business into the market. But when they are actually truly AI enabled, FOMO will kick in and others will quickly get on board. But some of them will be so far behind that they won't be able to get on board and they'll be left.